Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to the Community Conversation. This is a hujjat initiative where we learn from the personalities of our community, the past history, the present history, and also that can shape the future of our community. In this sort of interviews, we normally would want to find out what disappointment they had and how faith and community and their career shaped their life. Today I have here with me a well-known personality, not only of our community, but also recognized outside the community. He was born in Dar es Salaam in 1941. He is optician and audiologist by profession, but he is well known as a founder of Watford Electronics, which was established in 1972. In his lifetime of business and social work, he has achieved huge recognition outside of the community, such as the founding chair of Hertfordshire Ethnic Minority Business Network. He was the founding director of Bedfordshire Business Link, and his personal initiative saw the launch of Bedfordshire UK Online for business. But his highest accolade was when he was invited by the Queen to Buckingham Palace to celebrate the contribution of Watford Electronics, pioneering work in the field of e-business in 2003, and that made so much difference to the lives of so many of UK citizens. Among the honors he has received includes Racial Harmony Empowerment Award, Lifetime Achievement Award, Entrepreneur of the Year, Honorary MBA from University of Bedfordshire, High Sheriff of Bedfordshire, Deputy Lieutenant of Bedfordshire. In the Khojashi Aishnashri community life, he has contributed also. He was one of the founder member of Khojashi Aishnashri community of London, which was founded in 1971. He was also a member of the steering committee to draft the Constitution of the World Federation in the 1970s. There are many other roles through which he contributed to the development of our Khojashi Aishnashri community in the UK and elsewhere. I'm sure this will come in the conversation. He is none other than Nazirbhai Jessa. Welcome, Nazirbhai, to the Community Conversation. So, what are you doing just nowadays? I mean, I can see that you have a lot of free time.
I'm afraid I'm fully retired.
Right.
I'm more housebound these days. I read a lot, but my memory isn't good, so I forget everything I read. But I keep reading right into the midnight every evening, yes.
Okay. Yes. Inshallah, in this conversation, we will try and sort of help you along.
And I also take a lot of holidays, at least 4 holidays a year.
Okay. Yeah. Where do you go?
I love to go to the Far East, but recently I went to Iran.
Yeah.
This was my first ever visit, and I went to Turkey. I was so much taken by Turkey, Istanbul itself. Within 6 months, I went back to Istanbul to see all those Byzantine buildings, etc. It's awesome.
Right.
And I'm hoping I'll make a third visit very soon.
So you like history then?
Oh, absolutely love it.
I want to come to, I mean, you have got a lot of honors and accolades, I can see. I mean, I only mentioned a few of them, but I want to talk about a couple of them. One of them is, of course, the accolade that the Queen gave you. Can you just relate what happened there?
My company, Watford Electronics, was one of perhaps the most advanced, had the most advanced e-business software in the country.
At that time?
At that time.
Yeah.
And at that time, Amazon was nowhere. So you could say perhaps in the world. And out of the blue, a letter came from Buckingham Palace. I opened it, and it was from the Queen. Of course, the Queen doesn't write letters. The secretary does. But it says, I am one of the 400 pioneers of this country with a population of 62 million. And she would like to invite me to Buckingham Palace to say thank you for my achievement and what I have done for the citizens of this country.
Of this country. So that's a very high recognition.
Very high
62 million people, yeah.
To give you some idea, Sir Clive Sinclair was there.
Right.
Elton John was there. There were those big names, those who have done so much for the country. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I also want to talk about that you were given a High Sheriff position in Bedfordshire, and then of course the Deputy Lieutenant of Bedfordshire. So this role of High Sheriff and Lieutenant, what does it involve? And why were you given? Yeah,
this is very interesting. I was on holidays in the Far East, and I suddenly received a message from my son saying, "Can you please phone Andy Raymond urgently?"
Who is this guy?
I didn't know who Andy Raymond was.
Okay.
There was his mobile number. When somebody says that, you jump, which is what I did, and made a call to Andy Raymond from Far East, and I said, "What is it all about?" He said, "Nazir, don't worry. You don't know me, but I know you, and I want to nominate you for the post of High Sheriff of Bedfordshire." I said, "Well, what does High Sheriff do?" He said, "Don't worry. Please accept my invitation. I mean, this is a very high-level position." So I said, "Provisionally, I'm telling you yes. However, when I come back, you have to brief me as to what I have to do." So this person, I didn't even know, but he thought I was the right person for this position.
Right, and what it entails then as a High Sheriff?
As High Sheriff, it's much more ceremonial.
Okay.
100+ years ago, High Sheriff was everything. He was the law, he was the judge, he was the jury, everything. And a lot of past High Sheriffs, I'm going back 300-400 years ago, because they were crooks as well, many lost their lives, they were killed. Anyway, these days it doesn't happen. Right. Now, the three main areas which the High Sheriff is required is to look after the circuit judges when they come to the county. I have to make sure I take them to dinner, I sit with them on the bench and listen to all the proceedings, etc. Then, if there is an election, then I would be the word is
Election Commissioner?
Returning officer. I would be the returning officer. The third one was, if there was a compulsory purchase of a property, it would be in the name of the High Sheriff. It would be done.
Okay, all right. So what about the Deputy Lieutenant, something similar?
Now, about 100 years ago, the High Sheriff lost that position of power. Instead, Lord Lieutenant became the Queen's or the monarch's representative for the county.
Okay.
So that Lord Lieutenant is the person, but the Lord Lieutenant can't get everywhere. So he or she nominates at least up to 20 deputy lieutenants, and whenever minor royalties come to the county, or there are some other factors, then they would ask us to perform the duty.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
that gives a very nice explanation.
Yeah. Oh, now, there was also one of the duty that I had as High Sheriff was to give certificates to the new citizens of the country.
Right.
Those people who had become citizens.
Right.
That was the highlight of my year, yeah.
And you enjoyed it?
Absolutely.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
Okay, so I think now I want to go back to your background, and you were born in Dar es Salaam, 1941. Talk to me about your childhood times. Do you remember anything about your childhood times? What was it like? I mean, we are talking about now just after the war, presumably.
Correct. Right. During the war.
Yeah.
I was born during the war. Of course, I know nothing about the war. All I know is in the early, up to 1950, there was rationing, and that is one thing I remember about the war. All the food stuff that was there was being sent to UK to look after the returning armies of, well, the
so
army.
There were shortages in Tanzania.
There were severe shortages in UK, so they were taking all the food from Tanzania and sending that to UK.
So basically Tanzania also suffered a shortage.
Suffered, yes, right.
Okay, so now that's interesting that the food was going to UK.
Exactly. And my father had a rice mill, so they had sent a police officer who would stay there all day, making sure we were not selling rice to anybody. Right. And at the end of the day, they would take all the rice and pass it over to the authorities.
Right. So
we were paid for it, mind you, but still.
Okay. No, that's interesting. So basically, so your schooling then happened, presumably all your schooling, primary and secondary, in Dar es Salaam.
Correct.
So at that time, this is how I think you speak very good Gujarati and English and all that, because you were taught Gujarati at that time?
Up to standard 6, it was all in Gujarati. And then from standard 7, it turned into English.
Right.
So of course Gujarati is bound to be good, yeah?
Right.
The schools were segregated. We had government Indian secondary school, government African secondary school, etc. So I went to government primary school and then the government Indian secondary school.
Well, so talk to me about your parents and what sort of influence they had in your career, or perhaps in your growing up, and also a bit of background of where they came from and all that. So it gives a very good picture gives us a sense of what your background is. Yeah.
My family came from Lalpur, which is near Jamnagar. My great uncle, who was born in 1889, at the age of 19, he left India and came to East Africa, to Tanzania. At that time, it was German East Africa. This was before the First World War.
Right.
And he established there. He worked for some other businesses, Indian businesses, and was saving money to make sure he could start his own business.
Right.
At the time, my family was Ismaili.
Then and they originally come from Lalpur, near Jamnagar. Yeah.
Near Jamnagar. Okay. Both my father's family and my mother's family were Ismailis. Yeah. And in 1908 is when they converted to Ishnashri religion.
And many also converted at that time?
There were so many people who converted to Ishnashri faith that in Lalpur it was almost 50% Ishnashris and 50% Ismailis. But Ishnashris didn't have a place to hold their function, so the Jamaat Khana was divided. They put a curtain in the middle. One side was for Ishnashris and the other side was Ismailis.
So in 1908, the community did not have any hassle about,
no.
They coexisted.
They coexisted so well. My mother's father, he converted to Ishnashri faith, but his brother didn't.
Right.
So there were these families which were divided. They were not going to fight over this building.
No.
Yeah? So there was a lot of cooperation between the two communities.
Okay.
However, of course, eventually they got their own Imambara.
Yeah. Now, as I understand it, Bahadur Bhai Mauji's family was very instrumental in this?
Yes. My mother always told me it was Bahadur Ali Mauji's family that brought the religion to Lalpur.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. That name has stuck here forever.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure everybody knows the Bahadur Ali Mauji family.
Yes, a well-known person.
Very well-known person.
Yeah.
And she...
Anyway, what I thought, which is also very important, is that when your great uncle came to Tanzania.
Before I go to that, once they became Ithnasharis, they didn't have any books, nothing, and they didn't read Quran or anything.
Right.
Luckily, Haji Naji had written all these books in Gujarati. Had he not provided those books, I don't know where the religion would have ended.
So, you know, we have to thank Haji Naji.
Absolutely, 100%. Haji Naji kept the religion alive.
So I want to come back to Tanganyika, German East Africa at the time, because your great uncle came, and as I understand from a little bit of reading the history, and because I was born in that is Salaam, and I used to see your family, and you also had quite a lot of investments. So tailoring was one of the enterprise that he started, I take it, and then went on to then soap factory and then the mill. So he was quite an entrepreneur, and your family were also entrepreneur by
absolutely. It amazes me. My great uncle and my number 2 uncle, they didn't speak English, and yet they were able to achieve so much. My uncle arrived in 1909. By 1912, they had their own business. It was tailoring business. The 2 brothers were running the tailoring business. But because of the war, there was shortage of cloth or material, and it wasn't going that well. Once the war was over, they got a large license to import cloth from India, and they managed to once again thrive in this tailoring business. But at the end of the day, there was a limit to how much they could do. So my uncle thought, let's go into some other business. There are lots of coconut plantations in Tanzania. So they established a coconut oil mill. Now, with oil mills, the next thing comes soap, because soap is made from oil and caustic soda. So they started making soap as well. But their soap wasn't very good. So my elder uncle told the other uncle, why don't you go to India, get married, come back and learn about soap making as well, which is what he did. And they had this oil and soap factory. Now, this was in about 1922. Then they thought, we could do something more. And they invested in a rice mill. In 1925, they had a rice mill as well, and maize mill factory, which is the basic diet of the Africans in Tanzania. So they had 4 different businesses going. My father and my younger uncle, they came over in 1926. So with 4 brothers, they had a lot of manpower, and the business just flourished. It became so big that by 1940, 41, which is when I was born, it was among the top 10 businesses in Tanzania.
So it's quite an interesting history, and I think we won't go into it because I have got so much to cover. Let me now go back to schooling. So basically, you finished your schooling, and then what happened? You went outside Tanganyika to study?
Yes. After I finished my school, which was in 1958, I corresponded with a college in Pune to learn to make soap, and I got admission. So in 1959, I went to India to learn soap making. When I went to the college, the principal looked at my certificate and he said, "Oh, but you haven't done maths. I can't give you a place." Now here I am, 17-year-old young lad, and he's being told, go away. That really disappointed me. I was so disappointed. He said, you will have to do matriculation in India. So I went and joined a school. That was easy, but it turned out that English and Gujarati, 2 languages were compulsory. But no, sorry, English and Hindi were compulsory, and 3rd language was Gujarati. Now, I didn't know Hindi, so I had to learn Hindi to read and write and pass the Hindi test, matriculation.
So did you manage to then understand how the soap is made?
No, after the schooling was over, I went back to the college and I said, I've done my matriculation. It turned out the college had closed down.
So you had difficulties, all right.
So
you came back to Dar es Salaam?
I just came back to Dar es Salaam, never to go back to India.
So what happened after that? Then
after that, I joined the family business, which was thriving, and I became a salesperson. And I didn't realize my potential as much as my uncle did. And he saw I was so good that after 2 years of working in the family business, he said, would I go to our cotton ginnery in Masaka, which is in Uganda. He said, and look after. He even bribed me by saying, I will increase your wages and you won't have to pay for your food or housing at all.
Right.
So I accepted the offer and I went to Uganda in 1980.
No, 1960s.
Sorry.
Yeah, 1960.
I went to Uganda in 1962.
Right, okay.
And
so, so in Uganda, you were successful, I take it. And as I understand it, one day you were telling me that you got a new Peugeot from your uncle.
Yeah.
And you were very excited about it.
Well, I had just turned 20, and it so happened I was talking to my uncle in Dar es Salaam over the phone, and he said, "Did you go to Kampala?" I said, "Oh, the car doesn't function. You know, the car is no good. I just couldn't go to Kampala." He said, "Go and buy a new one." And there I am, 20-year-old young man. I went and bought a brand new Peugeot for myself.
Right.
I was over the moon.
So you treated yourself in that sense.
I definitely did, yeah.
Now I want to leave East Africa because there's so much other things to discuss. What made you come to UK then?
Okay, after finishing in Uganda, I went 2 years in Uganda. I went back to Tanzania. And over there, by then my uncle had died and I had to work under other family members, but I wasn't very happy. So I decided, without education, I have no future whatsoever. And one day I said, that's it, I'm going to London and I will become an optician. And literally within 3 days of making this decision, I bought a plane ticket and came to London. Right. That was it was on 24th September 1964. Right. I distinctly remember the day.
So it was an autumn time in London.
Was.
So what was your impression of UK, or London rather?
Well, I was so keen, and I was now a free young man, not what I was in Tanzania. So I was very happy. And luck had it, my brother was in London prior to me going there.
The elder brother?
Elder brother.
Yeah.
And the landlady with whom he had stayed, I went and stayed with her. So there was some familiarity as well.
Right.
And she asked, this is funny, she asked me, "You have come here, what are you going to study?" I told her I was going to study optics. She said, "Have you got your admission?" I said, "No." She was flabbergasted. She said, "How did you manage to come here without admission?" I said, "Mrs. Long, I am here and I'll get admission." Next day, I went to the City College in London and went and talked to the head of the optics department. He saw my certificates and he said, "That's great, you've got admission."
Right.
And not only that, that afternoon I had 2 lessons as well. At that time, it will surprise you to know, the annual fees were £65
per year.
Per year.
Okay.
That's cheap.
A lot of money at the time.
Yeah, it is. But still a lot cheaper, yeah?
Right.
Anyway, that evening when I went back, Mrs. Long said, "What happened?" And when I narrated what had happened, she just couldn't believe it.
Okay.
And there I was.
Right. So basically now you finished your optics, and I understand also from the conversation we had that you also did audiology. Now,
the reason for doing audiology was I wanted to have my own business, and I thought optics on its own is not sufficient.
Yeah.
So I went and joined the University College Hospital, London, and became an audiologist as well.
And then one day you saw an advert for AAA, and then you decided to go for an interview. And I just want to summarize that, that you then ended up in AAA. But now we'll come back to AAA, but when you came in 1964, you then, there was a community existing of Khoja Shia Ishnashri, but there were students. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. There were, when I came, 1964, there must be approximately 100 odd students all over UK. And they all were members of the Khoja Shia Isnashri Students' Union, which was formed in 1958.
Right.
And I came in 64, I attended the first meeting, and in 1965 I became a committee member of the union. And we used to hold functions, the major functions, not all the functions, like Muharram Majlises, Ashura Majlises, Jalismu Majlises, Ramadan Amals, and Eid functions.
Right.
That's
okay.
what we used to have.
So basically then the Khoja Shia Ishnashri Union was functioning under various presidents and committees, but then you had to leave for AAA,
prior to that, in 1966, I was elected president of the union.
Right, okay.
So from 66, 67, 68, I was the president.
Right.
And then came, one day I opened this newspaper and I saw the advert that newly rich, oil-rich Libya was recruiting medical staff. So I applied, went for an interview and got a job in Libya.
Right.
This was absolutely essential for me because I needed seed money to start my own business.
And you were able to get the seed money?
I certainly was. I went to Libya and my wages tripled overnight, which was quite good. And I was with money, I was very careful. I always made sure I saved. I took out £60 every month for my expenses, and the rest went into the bank.
Right.
There was Barclays Bank there, but even that Barclays Bank I didn't trust because it was in Libya. So I had standing order that the money should go to Switzerland in my Swiss bank account and not in Barclays.
So you were quite sharp at that time about your money side of it.
Money was, you couldn't diddle me. I was very careful about
Okay,
money.
now, at that time there was a revolution in Libya, and Muammar Gaddafi came. I understand you met him?
Yeah, I had just finished my first year, and one morning I heard all these fireworks, and I wondered what the hell these fireworks were. When I looked out of the window, I realized there were all these army officers outside, and it turned out to be a revolution. The Italian woman living near, in the flat next door to me, she came to my door. She said, "Nazir, c'est revolution." There you are. And there was this revolution. I was very worried that my family would wonder what is happening to me. On the third day, I went to send out a text message telegram. In those days we had telegram. I went to the post office to send a telegram, and the post office said, "We can't send telegram without the authority of the Revolutionary Council." So I jumped into the car. I knew where the Revolutionary Council was based. It was at the radio station.
So that's where you met Colonel Gaddafi?
Yeah. So I went in. You wouldn't believe, I went through at least 20 soldiers holding machine guns. One by one, I kept on telling them in Arabic that I wanted to go to the Mudir, which is the head. And then I knocked the door. I went in, and there was young Gaddafi. I think he was 27 or 28 years old, wearing dark glasses. He hadn't slept. And there was a small machine gun on his table. And he asked me, why had I come? And I said, I wanted to send a telegram to my mother to say all is well, but they want your stamp. So he stamped my paper, and I went to the post office and was able to even send the telegram.
Well, that's quite interesting. But you must have been scared when you were sort of going through all those.
Can you imagine 20-odd soldiers
Yeah.
with machine guns pointing?
Now I want to come back to 1971. That's when you came back. Now, talk to me in 1970. I understand two things happened. You were president at that time in 1971 of the Union?
I came back in 1970.
Right.
And immediately after I came back, there was election. And I was once again elected the president of the Union.
Now, two things happened, which I think the audience might be interested. The first death that occurred from our community. So, and the second thing is that you decided that now we need to have a Jamaat.
Yep, right.
So, talk to us about.
Well,
but if you can do it briefly, because we.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
In 1971, we had the first death of a lady.
Right.
And it fell upon me to look after the funeral. I had never ever done anything like that. Anyway, I managed to organize it in East London Mosque. It was such a basic place. Now I needed ladies. Luckily, my sister was there. Mariam Baijiwa was there. And there were two other ladies. I don't recall their names. I got 4 of these ladies to come and help me. Now, they had never given any ghusl or kafan. Luckily, my brother-in-law had all the books on religion, so they got the book for kafan and dafan. Reading from the book, they gave kafan, and then, they gave the ghusl, kafan, and we had the funeral done. After the funeral, I said to myself, we have now reached a stage where we can't be a students' union. We have to form a Jamaat.
A Jamaat, yeah.
So at the next general meeting, I put forward a resolution to form a Jamaat. We were, with children, I think we would be no more than 250 heads. And it was unanimously passed that we will have a Khoja Shia Ishnashri Jamaat of London. Of course, that was very easy, but then the task came of writing the constitution.
Right, right.
And I had Zulfikar Hamir, who was very good. He helped me throughout all these preliminary things for the formation of the Jamaat. Together, we produced a constitution. Of course, we looked at the constitution of various Jamaats in East Africa. Based on that, we wrote a constitution.
Okay, right.
However, we were not legal people. Now, Mustafa Chandu lived in North London, so we decided to go to his house in the evening and get help from him to write it in legal language.
Right.
Mustafa and Habib, they lived together.
Right.
So we must have paid at least 10 visits to their house
to write this
to write this, to finalize the constitution.
Right.
Once it was finalized, then we called a constitutional conference, which was in the...
it was in Regent's Park Mosque?
Yeah, it was in summer of 1971 in Regent's Park Mosque.
Right.
And on that day, I had full house. There were people who I had never seen before, the Khojas I had never seen before. They had all come there. And the main subject of discussion was not to have the word Khoja. But I was insistent that Jamaat will be called Khoja. When it came to voting, I realized, wow, we were short of 2 votes. So luckily, R.H. Nur Muhammad, the accountant from Dar es Salaam.
Yeah, Gavian Company.
Gavian Company, that's the one. He had come with his family, his wife and his children. So I went outside and I told his wife to come in, and also his young son, who was about 12 years old. And I said, come and vote. There were objections, but I said, there can't be any objection because we have no constitution, so everybody can vote. Even 12-year-old can vote. And we won the day by 1 single vote,
right.
And the name Khoja remained
Right. So obviously you had a steering committee and all that, and then the first committee also was formed at the time. Now, just going forward,
let me, because it was the first committee, let me give you the names.
I think it's
very important. Fidaus and Dharamsi, Ghulam Jan Mohammed, Bashir MD Karmali, Zulfikar Hamir, and myself, Nazir Jessa. We were 5 people. We were, and Roshan Merali Mapero. We were 6 of us. We were the first committee.
So you were you were one of the founder member? Or the founder member?
I was the founder.
And then you had the first
of the community,
which, obviously, because you brought in the resolution and you brought in the subject matter and all that. Okay. I want to now move forward because in 1976, once again, you played a prominent role in the form. Prior to that, in 1972, there was an exodus from Uganda. And Ugandan Asians came, and a lot of our members from Koja community, Koja Shia Ishnashi community from Uganda came to UK. So at that time, just give me a sense of what was happening at that time. Yeah,
once the Jamaat was formed, and there were more people as well attending our events, we would have them at YMCA or some of these church halls, etc. We would have our events. And luckily, my brother-in-law, because he had all these books in Gujarati, he would deliver the majlises.
So the home sort of spun Zakir.
Yeah, he was our Zakir. These were the essential things. Without him, I'm not sure what we would have done.
Yeah.
And suddenly, there was the exodus from Uganda. And I forgot to tell you that when I came back from Libya, I had saved sufficient money to buy a house outright a detached house outright in Watford. And 2 of us were living in that house. Then in 1972, when the exodus happened, my family members came over. So from 2, we were 13 people living in a 4-bedroom house.
Right.
Nobody complained. We were all very happy.
Right, because you were all together.
We were all together. And by then, I had already started my business, Watford Electronics. Zulfikar Hamir helped me on that. He's a graduate from Imperial College, electrical engineer. There was no electronics in those days. The valves were just being replaced by transistors. So those were the early days. And I was running this mail order business from home, from my bedroom. And then, of course, all these people came. So I had 2 duties. I had to run the business.
And also the community.
Community, and I was working full-time as an optician.
Oh, right. Okay.
And all the saving from my salary was going into Watford Electronics.
So you then sort of built up Watford Electronics from then onwards, I take it.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And then we obviously talked about that it achieved a high accolade where the Queen then...
right.
So I don't want to go into that, but the sense that Ugandan Asians came, so obviously the community did not have a place of its own, and so what happened? I mean, basically...
Initially, I would say for the first couple of months, we had problems. We didn't have any place to congregate. However, luckily, there was an Iranian gentleman who had bought a big house in Willesden Green, North London. And he gave it to us to use it, and no charge whatsoever. So we were able to hold our majlises in this particular house. It was quite a big house. We could fit very well in there. So that was a bonus to us. Yes, right.
So when did the Hammersmith Imam Bara purchased? I take it was a church there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, while we were holding these majlises, of course, there were more Ugandan nations started coming, and one of them was Habib Walji. He was very keen to see we had an Imam Bara, and he with his friend Habib Nasaratansi, they had located a church building which was up for sale in Hammersmith. So they said, we'll buy it. However, the there was a restriction. This particular building could not be used for nightclub or any of those sort of things. It had to be a religious place. And of course, that meant they couldn't buy it and make a profit. Instead, Habib Bhai said, why not buy it and make it into a imambara? And he worked very hard to get funds to buy the building. It cost us about £70,000.
At that time,
at that time. Okay. And we bought it, yes.
Right, so then we now had a Hammersmith Centre.
Yeah.
So then in 1976, as I understand it, Marhum Mullah came to UK and he wanted to sort of establish a global organization, the World Federation, to look after the global community. And obviously you had a role to play in that?
Yes, when Mullah came, Mullah had this vision of having a World Federation as opposed to just Africa Federation and various other Jamaats. And he discussed with various people. We had meetings, including meeting in my own house in Watford. We had meetings and we sounded out so many people and everybody was in agreement. Reluctant or otherwise, they were in agreement.
Right.
And a constitution was produced by Mullah Sahab, a draft constitution. Of course, that wasn't the final constitution. Mullah then went back to Dar es Salaam. But what he did was, we had a
steering committee, didn't you?
No, before steering, we had a provisional meeting. And Mullah said, we must have a steering committee for the Constitutional Conference.
Right.
And 3 people were elected for this particular steering committee.
Appointed or elected?
They were really appointed more than elected.
Yeah, okay.
One was Hussein Nath.
He was a solicitor.
Right. Second was Raza Mamdali Jamal Ramji.
Right.
And third was Nazir Jessa, myself.
Right.
3 of us were the steering committee. I could say that we gave birth to what World Federation, really.
Okay. Well,
a constitutional conference, we organized the requirement,
right.
And a conference was held in Hammersmith in Mambara.
1976.
Yes.
Right, okay. So now that's interesting. Now we just sort of move forward. I just want to sort of finally now discuss the purchase of Stanmore. Did you play a part in the purchase of Stanmore? Did you advise the committee at the time? Did you have consultation with, and what do you sort of remember of that?
Once the Jamaat was formed in 1971, I was always a committee member in one form or the other. I had never ever given it up.
Right.
And of course, once the World Federation was formed, there was quite a lot of work on me. You know, I had to do a lot of work. And I didn't advise because I don't think I was capable of advising World Federation. Mullah knew a lot more. So, by now, Hammersmith Imamwara was too small for us.
Right.
At every event, you would find the 2 halls were absolutely full and people were standing outside in the cold.
Okay.
So we decided we need a bigger premises. Also, the people from South London, they were not very happy coming to north of the river. So we found a big but dilapidated building in Stanmore, which was up for sale.
Yeah.
It was about, I think, £600,000.
Right.
We purchased that particular building, and the people from South London, they purchased
the Hydri Centre prior to the new one.
Yeah, prior to the new one.
Okay.
So they moved to South London, we moved to North London. But the building was totally dilapidated.
So it needed
we could not use it at all. So initially we started using the outbuildings. For good few years we used the outbuildings, and this was renovated. It's a listed building, so things can't be changed too much. and it cost us, I think, somewhere in the region of 4.5 million in total to get that building up and running.
Right, and it is serving its purpose at the moment, and inshallah as we move forward.
We had, I must say, we had lots of problems to get the funds, but eventually we managed to get the funds. Yes,
that should serve very well for the community. And now obviously there are other vision that community is developing. Now I want to come to the final sort of couple of sort of exploration with you. You were a founder member of, say, London Jamaat. You also participated in the construction of both the Constitution of London Jamaat as well as World Federation. And so what I want to ask you now is, perhaps you can give some idea about what you feel the future of our London Jamaat.
Sorry, can I come? You have just triggered the memory. Once the World Federation was formed, I remember Sachu Abdurasul and sons from Sachupira. He was there at the meeting. He came to me. He said, "We are electing the first committee, and I want you to be the treasurer." I said, "Look, accountancy is not my strong point." He said, "Don't worry, but I want you to be the first treasurer." So I was elected the first treasurer of the World Federation.
Right, okay.
Didn't do a good job though.
But at least you had a position.
Yeah, position.
Okay, coming back to this question, what is your expectation now, given we are in 21st century, London Jamaat is moving forward? What would you advise the leadership and the community about your views about the future of the community, if you have any?
Advice? I don't think I can advise.
But you may have a view.
I find today's youth is well versed in every aspect of living in this country. Yeah? The one thing we must do is, as much as we must promote our religion, our culture, at the same time we should make sure we interact, we network with the host community. That is very, very crucial, because success comes by being with the host community, not being introvert.
All right.
We have to be extrovert.
So even as a community, we should now break the barrier and engage with outside.
Outside,
right.
a lot
more than what we do.
What we are doing currently.
And so we open up our doors to the host community. What about the global community under, say, World Federation? You were sort of one of the pioneers constructing the Constitution. So what is your view about the sort of World Federation or the World Global sort of community? Do you have any views that you want to share with us?
Nothing great. Suffice to say, World Federation is a very essential body. We have to make it a lot stronger than what it is now. It should be able to. If I say dictate, it sounds a little bit too much, but we should have a very strong team at the top, at World Federation level, and guiding all the other Jamaats in the world. It is essential.
So that's the fundamental role of the World Federation.
Otherwise, we'll get lost, because we are in New Zealand, Australia, North America, Europe, and Africa, of course.
Right.
And World Federation will keep us all together.
Right.
After all, what? We are no more than 150,000 in number?
Yeah, 150, some say 120, some say 125, so we say between 120 and 150.
Well, that is, even if it's 150,000, it's a very small community. If we are not careful, we could go the same way as the Parsis have gone.
Yes.
They were the same number, and they are now losing their culture, their everything.
So two things are very important, or three things in your estimation. One is that our faith. Second is our culture, means that if you can retain our cultural characteristics in terms of language and other things. And third, that we should not be introvert, but we should engage with as many communities outside of
as
us.
possible. Yes,
Yeah.
and the government encourages diversity. So when our government is encouraging diversity, who are we to say no? And we have to be, we must participate in political life of this country, which we haven't done much.
Okay.
We need to be a lot more proactive on the political side as well.
So Nazirbhai, with those very good advice that you have given to the leadership as well as to the community from your own experiences and your own background, I think we'll thank you very much. We'll end here. And
Thanks
it was
a lot.
really,
Thanks.
it was really good to speak with you, and it was nice to also understand your background much more fully than what I already had in mind before I did the interview.
No,
so
thanks for inviting me, really.
No.
These days, memory is not that great,
Yeah, but
so I tend to
I
forget.
think you did extremely well. Extremely well.
Thanks a
So,
lot,
you know, I
thanks.
mean, you remembered quite a lot of things, and historically it was important as well. So thank you very much. And there we are. We had a very good conversation with Nazir Bhai, and I think that we learned a lot from his own experiences and his advice, and also what shaped his personality when he came to London, particularly in terms of business and the accolade he has received outside of the community, and also his very important contributions that he made inside the community as well. So with that, I would say Khuda Hafiz, and we'll see you inshallah next time with another interview, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.